Hello and welcome to another edition of SportsTalk Philadelphia here on LaSalle TV. Today we are going to talk about the Flyers and the Sixers as they recap their seasons. Playoffs is starting to come up, so we're going to get on that and much more after this intro.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Welcome back to STP on LTV. I'm your host, Josh Abrams. With me today is Sam Brown and Nick Kerr. Before we get into the Flyers talk to recap their season, we're going to talk about some of the headlines that are going around in Philly sports today. And one of them, even though it's not really much of a big headline, is the fact that the Phillies last night were able to get some position players on the mound as they got crushed 15-1 by the Nationals last night. Now, does this come as a surprise? I certainly would hope so, because the Phillies have just not really been on their game recently. Their 2018 woes are kind of starting to come back a little bit, and it's a really young season, obviously, guys. But you got to think that we can't really see that again. I don't want to see Aaron Altherr on the mound striking guys out. I'd rather see the pitchers do that.
Yeah, and we've been talking about if the Phillies do fall into these bad habits and have blowout losses like this, it'll be due to the pitching, and that's going to be the weak spot as long as they don't do something about it. It's even been an issue so far with some of the star pitchers. We saw Aaron Nola didn't have such a great game last week against the Nationals, so just reiterating that they need to clean up the rotation.
What do you think, Nick?
See, I just think they had a bad night. They'll bounce back from. It's only one game. They have so many more games to go. So.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's obviously the way you got to look at it with it being this early in the season and hundreds of more games left to play, obviously. But I mean, the bullpen guys. I mean, we're going to talk about them a lot this year. I mean, it's just we're not going to be able to get away from them while they continue to give up these runs. I mean, it's pretty clear that this team needs to add another guy, and discussions like this are going to be held all over the place, whether if it's on this show or whether if it's at the front office. But is there anyone that you guys are really looking out for? Because I'd like to think that we need to get somebody to help us out with this problem.
Craig Kimbrell is still unsigned. He would be a great addition. He wouldn't be very expensive to sign because we're already a little bit into this season, and he needs a team. So pursue Craig Kimbrell with all they've got.
Just going off what Sam said, I completely agree with Sam. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just pretty clear that this team still needs a little bit more help. But another big headline that's going around that we actually just found out today was that the Phillies are going to be hosting the 2026 All-Star Game. It was just announced today. Now, what I find really interesting about this, guys, is that while it's determined that we're going to host this in 2026, we don't know who's going to host the other All-Star Games from 2022 to 2025. And while it's really not that big of a deal, I would like to think it's pretty exciting that somewhere down the line, 7 years from now, we're going to be having an All-Star Game here.
Yeah, and I feel like this is quite overdue. It'd be the first time at that point, it'll be the first time in 30 years that the All-Star Game has been in Philadelphia. It'll be the first time in Citizens Bank Park, so it's a very exciting time 7 years from now.
It's a very fun time. I actually went to the Home Run Derby down in Washington last year. That was a fun experience. And it's just a fun time. It brings a lot of people in and shows people what a Citizens Bank Park is.
Yeah, and that's certainly. Go ahead, Sam.
Derby at Citizens Bank Park. That sounds like a slugfest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a hitter's park. I think a lot of balls are going to be cranked out of the park. Maybe. I mean, who knows? Yeah. The jumbotron might be messed up a little bit. But I guess another headline that we're going to talk about real quick before we get into Flyers talk is the Eagles signing a guy named Luis Perez. Now, I have no clue who this guy is at all. It says it all right there. He played in the AAF. He has some kind of quarterbacking experience. Is there any kind of reaction from you guys? I mean, this isn't really that significant, but it's another move the Eagles are making.
I mean, he's a backup quarterback, and if Doug Peterson can have his way with this kid, maybe he'll be a solid guy down the road to back up Carson Wentz.
I mean, I really don't know too much about this guy because I really haven't watched the AAF at all. So hopefully he is a good, consistent backup down the line and maybe a future practice squad guy.
Yeah, and it's certainly going to be interesting to see whether or not how long he stays with the team, just because of the fact that we already have Carson Wentz and Nate Sudfeld is still on the team. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't think it's going to be too much of a headline down the road, but again, it's Eagles news, so it's news worth talking about. So let's get into Flyers talk now. We're going to recap what was ultimately a disappointing season for the. I guess so. We're in 2019 now, and I think the last time the Flyers made the playoffs in a year that ended in an odd number was 2011. They've made the playoffs every other year, and it just goes back to the one word that describes this organization the best, and that's inconsistency.
Inconsistent, mediocre, subpar. I mean, there's a litany of words that you can use to describe that all mean the same thing about how the Flyers have played, because they keep doing the same thing season after season, is playing mediocre hockey and then not addressing it in the offseason. And what they do, in a way of addressing it, is signing players past their prime that can't contribute consistently once they're on this team, and they don't do much to develop their players once they make it to the NHL.
Well, what's your observation of that, Nick?
I kind of have to agree with Sam. It is kind of like a roller coaster effect, and how they're bringing in a bunch of washed-up guys who are way past their prime. They're basically done with playing hockey. They're collecting a paycheck at this point. Basically, they need to start to bring in guys from their farm system to actually get them experience.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that they were trying to do that a little bit. This team is pretty young in most facets, more than others, but I mean, it's really hard, and I say this every time we talk about the Flyers, it's really hard to make the playoffs, especially this year when at some point in time during the season, and into January, so you're a couple months in, the Flyers were the worst team in the league at one point. They were in the bottom, where teams like Chicago and Arizona and all those bottom of the pack teams, that's where the Flyers were at one point, and then Scott Gordon comes in, Chuck Fletcher, they turn it around, but it's just, it's too little too late. So, I mean, it's a long season, obviously, but is there anything significant, positive or negative, that stands out to you guys that happened for the Flyers this season?
Getting rid of Dave Haxtell, finally. It was well overdue at the time they did it. Scott Gordon had done quite a good job in Lehigh Valley getting the Phantoms deep into the playoffs. So bringing that seasoned playoff experience in a lower league but bringing that seasoned playoff experience to the Flyers certainly jolted them, and it was a necessary boost, but like you mentioned, it was too little too late, and obviously we saw that with the way their season ended.
Going just off of Sam's point, I agree with the same thing. Bringing him in really helped them because after that happened, they were going in spurts of winning a whole bunch of games in a row, then losing, then winning a whole bunch of times. A few points they were first in the Metro. So
yeah, and go.
Go ahead.
It's just tough because at this point we need to see we have a new foundation in the front office now, but we need to see it play out in the regular season next year. And so I guess my next question is, looking back on this season, the Flyers are obviously done now. They're going to watch the Stanley Cup playoffs from their homes. How would you grade this team and why?
D for disappointing. Like you mentioned, the moves that they made in the front office were too little too late, and there still is a way to go in addressing the front office. I think Palm Holmgren needs to be shown the door. Obviously, a new coach needs to be brought in. It's disappointing that they lost Joel Quenneville down to the Florida Panthers, which, I mean, they probably should have seen that coming. And I don't believe that Chuck Fletcher had even reached out to Joel Quenneville. So they need to start weighing their other options much sooner rather than later. And that starts with improving that D grade.
Nick, you're a little bit more
Yeah.
positive with your
Yeah.
C-. Why is
I
that?
would, because they were improving just a little bit from because when they were in last place, I completely gave them an F. They were horrible. But when they were on those spurts, I saw, hey, there's life. And what they really need to do is they need to go off of what Sam said, just like bring in a whole new system and basically start from scratch, kind of.
Yeah, and I mean, do you think that would ever involve? We already traded away Wayne Simmons, and that was for me that was really disappointing just because of the kind of player he was, how much aggressiveness he brought every night. You talk about these new beginnings and starting from scratch. Does this involve giving Claude Giroux the boot, or is that a guy that you see staying with the organization for the rest of his time?
At this point, he's probably going to be here for life. Chuck Fletcher pretty much did mention that Claude Giroux, around the time of the trade deadline, was the only player who was completely safe from being traded, and I think that's going to stick from here until he decides he wants to stop playing. As far as bringing in new leadership, I would reassign some of the alternative captain assignments, maybe even the captain assignments around. I don't think Giroux is such a great leader. He's a very talented player, don't get me wrong there. But as far as leading the team on the ice, I mean, he pretty much says the same thing after every loss. And calling out the fans, that's just not captainly behavior.
What do you think, Nick?
I think he will be here for life. I do think some of the fans won't like it, though. Just of going off what Sam said, he basically led the team in all of the stat categories this year. He's that veteran presence that this young locker room needs to have if they're gonna try to compete.
And I think the one big positive thing that can come from this season, and at first I was hesitant about it just because of how young he is, but Carter Hart, I mean, everyone thought that he was going to save our season. Now, 20-year-old kid isn't going to just save the season like that, especially given the circumstances and how low the Flyers were. But Carter Hart is certainly going to be a mainstay in this organization for years to come, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty given.
Yeah, he's the goalie of the future. We saw his record on the screen. It was 16-13, and a lot of those losses were not his fault. Some of them were, and he really needs to clean up his game. But you have to give him credit for coming up and coming on strong and playing through an injury and keeping this team in the conversation, the playoff conversation, for months after he had come up.
What do you think about Carter Hart, Nick?
I like him better than Elliott. I think he'll be here for a long time. Elliott will probably be kicked to the curb pretty soon, just because how old he is, and Hart being 20 years old, he has a lot of hockey to play left.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another big part of this hockey season, and he's right behind me, Gritty. I mean, we found out ourselves that he wasn't supposed to be like this big hit or anything. I'd like to think that even though he has nothing to do with the mechanical aspects or the actual hockey terms, but he does make Flyers games a lot more fun to go to, right?
Yeah, and the Flyers are being talked about in media outside of sports media. I'm hearing on talk radio a lot more talk about the Flyers after the rise of Gritty. Even when they were making the playoffs last season, they weren't talking about the Flyers so much. But now that Gritty's part of the culture, he's part of what the team is. I love having this attention on our team.
What do you think about him, Nick?
I like him. I think he basically was the best thing that happened for this Flyers team this season.
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say. I mean, they didn't make the playoffs. It's kind of a wash, some people think. But nevertheless, we're going to take a quick commercial break. That's going to do it for Flyers Talk. When we come back, we're going to talk some Sixers, so stay tuned.
What are they? Oh my God! I swear these sports show hosts just get dumber and dumber as time goes on. Like I can't believe people are actually paid money, real money, more than what I make at my job to say this stupid stuff. Like I can't believe this crap. Oh my gosh! I'm about to lose it. I'm about to lose it. Like this is just how can they even?
Hey, what you doing?
This stupid sports show. These people have no idea how the game of basketball is played. Not at all.
Hey, you're not you when you don't watch LaSalle TV. Here, let me show you.
Have much more left, but the only reason why for everyone else it's a 1-year rent.
Talk Philadelphia here on LaSalle TV. I'm your host, all that much more.
Feel better now?
Better. You're not you when you're not watching LaSalle TV. To stay up to date, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Welcome back to Sports Talk Philly. Dave Roberts is here. He's cracking up. I got the two jokesters with me. It's going to be great. Jack Rohr also joins us.
Hi.
We're still going to talk some Sixers, guys. We are going to the playoffs for the second year in a row. Second consecutive 50-win season for Brett Brown and the Sixers. And they are going to host the Brooklyn Nets in the first round. It has finally been decided. So before we get into this whole playoff talk, because we can actually talk about it now, that's great. But let's talk about the season. So 51-31, 18 of our games, we were without Joel Embiid, and we were able to still get 50 wins. I'd like to think that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think on the side of that, like flip side of that, I know it's impressive, but a lot of dumb losses too on the other end. There's a lot of games where we were in it for 3 quarters, and all of a sudden, fourth quarter, we just just lose. So very Sixer thing to do apparently. But yeah, 18 games without Embiid, we still find ways to win. We have these new guys come in. We have new lineups. We figure things out, and 50 wins again is really good for this team, and really has high hopes for me at least for the future.
The Sixers were like 6 different teams this year. First it was Embiid and Simmons, then it was Embiid, Simmons, and Butler. Then it was Embiid, Simmons, Butler, Tobias. But every once in a while we're without Embiid. Every once in a while we're without Jimmy. It's like it changes all the time. It was really hard to get used to because I never knew who was going to be on the court.
I'm glad you brought both of those guys up, Jack, because those are the 2 really big acquisitions that we got in the offseason. Now we made a lot of other moves, getting people like Mike Scott, Boban. I mean, that's been a big hit.
Boban.
But we also got James Ennis and Jonathan Simmons and guys who I would think are a lot more athletic than the bench that we had in the beginning of this year. And now we have at least some sort of depth, but the bench did play a little inconsistently for my liking. So I guess, how do you guys feel, and what acquisition during this season do you think had the biggest impact?
Are we talking like big ones? Because I think Tobias is probably the best one. Because Jimmy is a flight risk. I don't know if Jimmy's going to stay. Tobias, I feel like, has a higher chance of staying. Obviously, I think Boban has a longer contract, and they're best friends. Yeah. So as long as Boban's here, I think Tobias stays. I like that core of 3 kind of better than I like Jimmy Butler. I don't like how he's kind of stirred the pot in both the places he's been. And I don't want to have to deal with those kind of chemistry issues if they arise. They kind of have a little bit here and there, but yeah. So Tobias is probably the biggest one. Biggest one for me personally is Boban. I love Boban. He's in John Wick 3. Great stuff.
I think we're all Bobby fans here. I don't think anyone's
Certainly.
I think I have to agree with Jack here. I'm a big fan of Tobias. It kind of scares me a little bit because I think actually all of our what's the word for it? The guys we brought in. There we go. I don't even say
the free agents, I guess.
Yeah. The guys we got. They're all have been pretty inconsistent this year, and we've seen them take over games at different times. We actually there's been few times we actually seen them all click at once and just destroy a team. But I think I am happy with just Tobias and Jimmy coming in. Bobby coming off the bench is actually really great because he's really unstoppable in the paint.
Oh my God!
Just because he's 7'4". I feel like that's something that not that the Sixers want, but just something we need to show that we're also still a force. If Joel Embiid comes out, we still have a monster coming in.
I mean, I don't really think people realize how big of a signing Boban was because before we got him, it was what, Amir Johnson, Jonah Bolden. Rashawn Holmes in the past. Like now we actually have guys who, you know, if Embiid is out for an extended period of time during the playoffs, which it may or may not be that way, I don't know. We have Boban and we also have Greg Monroe to come off the bench. I mean, you know, Monroe, people think he's washed up. He's only 28. I mean,
yeah, we talked about it before the show. I think Monroe is a really good pickup because, you know, he is a guy that like. He was a top 10 pick, and he came into this league thinking he was going to start and actually, like, you know, take over. And the game has changed a little bit for him, and, you know, he had some setbacks. But for him to come off the bench and, you know, have that much pressure on him, just, you know, go out there and do his job as a backup, I feel like that's a perfect position for him, including right now since we're in the playoffs.
Yeah, there are some matchups where I feel like Monroe could work as a backup center. Like there was like a Celtics one with like Aaron Baines. He could go up against Aaron Baines pretty well. It's just he kind of gets plays off the floor when teams play smaller. So in like against the Celtics team that need to play, like Baines is one of their bigger guys, he could go up against them. Yeah.
No, that's fair. I mean, and the thing is that Monroe actually played for the Celtics. So I mean, you know, if we and that's kind of important come playoff time because you know like the difference between Jack kind of alluded to it. There were like 6 different like consistent starting lineups throughout the year, and now we're at our best. And so my question to you guys is, we'll kind of dive into this when we talk about the playoffs during Fast Five. But, you know, like, are you guys scared of anybody in the East? I know we know how we're the 3 seeds, so Toronto and Milwaukee are pretty good. But I mean, do either of those teams concern you as we get closer to the playoffs?
I mean, obviously they do. They're so good, but the team that scares me the most is the Celtics.
Really?
The Sixers can't really stop small guards, and
That's
Kyrie
true.
Irving is one of the best small guards in the world.
Yeah.
So Kyrie is insanely intimidating for the Sixers to play. I have it written down here for the Nets, like D'Angelo Russell. I feel like he could, if he gets hot in one game, there's a game. Like, gone. Smaller guards are scary.
I'd like to think that it's not just done after that, but it has happened before where people like Russell or Spencer Dinwiddie just torches.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of those dumb losses. The dumb losses we have were against the Nets early on in the season because we didn't know how to stop D'Lo. We couldn't stop Spencer Dinwiddie, and you know Joe Harris, a 3-point contest champion. I'm scared of that wide open shot. So you know. I mean, the Nets do scare me, obviously. You saw the playoff bracket. Honestly, a lot of the teams that go on to the next round, if we make it to the next round, they scare me. So, like, if we have to play the Raptors, they scare me because we can play with them for 3 quarters, but we just couldn't finish. If we make it any further and we play against the top teams, and, of course, the Celtics, we have 1 win against them in the season. That's tough. And the Bucks, you know, Giannis is probably might be the MVP, and you know that team is really hot right now, so it's hard to stop them.
And it's all kind of anticipation up until Saturday because that's when it's all going to get started. But before we move on to Fast Five, I must ask how many games is this first round going to go?
Right now, just because I'm scared, because it's a small guard thing, it's 6 games. You know, I think we're going to come out 4-2. At some point, it's going to be 2-2, and everyone's going to be worried. But I feel like we should come out of that.
Yeah, I'm feeling 5. I got Dinwiddie and Russell going for like 30 each in a game and just taking it. But I'm pretty confident in the Sixers to take this one.
Oh, okay, all right. I was about to say. I thought he said the Nets in 5.
D'Angelo Russell, sweep.
I mean, the fact that we have finals. The fact that we have home court for this, at least for this first round matchup, kind of gives me closure in deciding that I think we'll win in 5 if we can somehow close it out at home like we did last year against the Heat. I think that would give us a lot of confidence heading into the second round. All right, so that's going to do it for Sixers talk. Let's move into Fast Five, and the first question is for Dave. We saw the bracket for the Eastern Conference. Who's your NBA champion, though? We didn't see the Western half, and you know it's a competitive bracket overall this year. So who do you think is going to come out on top?
The obvious answer is always to say the Warriors, you know. But you know, you never know in any year. It's hard to like 4 or get like a 4 championship. But who knows?
Yeah.
So I mean, the Warriors could be it. The Rockets are really good this season. The Bucks, like I said, are hot, so they could be it. But I mean, if I were just to say someone now, obviously I would say the Warriors, just because their starting lineup is all stars. So it's tough to stop.
Yeah, true. Jack, before we go into the Sixers playoff predictions, Luis Perez, is he actually going to be an Eagle by the time like opening day comes?
For sure. Luis Perez was the Texas A&M Commerce University, not Texas A&M, Division II national champ. 2017, 70% completion percentage, right? 5,001 yards, 46 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions.
Wow.
I'm not saying there's a starter competition here, but there's a starter competition here.
Yeah, Carson's got to be.
He should be scared. He should be looking over his shoulder, just paying attention.
All right. Let's start with the Sixers playoff predictions. I guess I'll start. I think the Sixers. I don't know what the limit is for this team. It's certainly not the sky because we can't beat some of these teams that are ahead of us. I think we're going to handle the Nets just fine. I think we'll have some struggles here and there, but if we have to play Toronto in the second round, then I'm going to have to throw the towel in and say that we will lose a competitive 6-game series. And if we lose in 6, that'll be even more. It'll be more bitter because Game 6 at that point would be at the Fargo, and so I think the Sixers are going to. I think they'll be just fine for the first round if they can be competitive with the Raptors in the second round and still lose, then Brett Brown will still have a spot in this organization. Dave, your predictions. How are you feeling?
Well, you said you don't know where the limit is this team. The sky is literally the championship. I feel like we have a good enough team on paper, to win a championship. So I feel like, it's either championship or, second round exit, like you said.
All right, Jack, what about you?
I said it earlier. D'Angelo Russell. No. No, I got 7 games against the Bucks, conference finals. Raptors playoff ghosts comes back and takes them. Yeah. So they lose game 1 at home every series.
That's true. Yeah.
That's very true.
So the Sixers winning.
Sixers. No, they losing to the Bucks in 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's fair. All right. That's going to do it for this week's edition of Sports Talk Philly. You can catch us on social media on Twitter at Sports Talk LTV. Catch us on Facebook, lasalle.edu/LaSalleTV, and also just go to our website, check us out. You can catch any of our episodes there, and we will see you next week. We hope you enjoy your weekend.